Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook.
So the red light's rolling. Welcome to today's Fleet Geeks podcast. My name's Pete Rushmer, and I'm one of the Fleet Geeks. Sadly, Mike can't be with us this week because he is busy training Transport Manager CPC. I think he's down in a place called Cookham at the Chartered Institute of Marketing, busy training up some future transport managers, which is one of the things he loves doing best. So you're just going to have to put up with me, but I'm joined today by two wonderful guests, which is a bit unusual for the Fleet Geeks podcast, but it's part of what we want to do moving forward and bring people in and introduce our listeners to some fantastic service offerings that will complement their businesses and that will complement if they're consultants, if they're transport managers as well. It'll either save them money, it will maybe complement the service offering that they're giving their clients. So I'm really pleased today to be joined by Nick and Joseph from Driving Down. Hi guys, what I'll do is I'll get you guys to introduce yourselves and if you can tell us a little bit about Driving Down. So Nick, let's go to you first. Nick, welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. How you doing, Nick?
Yeah, good. You built us up there. A lot of praise, to be honest with you. So I hope we don't let you down. No, happy to be here, to be honest with you. Thanks for inviting us. So yeah, my name's Nick Dodds. I'm currently the MD for Driving Down. Worked here for about 2 years now. So my experience or past history has always pretty much been in fuel cards. I've worked in the industry for about 12 years. And we originally sort of set up Driving Down as a business to try and help and support companies within the industry. So unfortunately, fuel cards has become a little bit of a murky world as it's sort of untransparent and there's a lot of bad practices. And obviously working in the industry for as long as I have, that kind of became apparent that customers could do with support and help to try and get through that. And obviously in the end, try and get savings through their fuel card providers. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate that. Over to you, Joseph. Joseph, you're the sales manager, aren't you?
I am, yeah. So I'm the sales manager here at Driving Down. Been in the unfortunate world of fuel cards now for coming up to 10 years. Similar sort of background to Nick, apart from I was the good-looking one within the business there, who was in charge of bringing in sales. And yeah, here at Driving Down, it's just a case of ensuring that businesses, and everyday people like us aren't sort of overpaying when it comes to the fuel cards, because having worked in fuel cards, unfortunately, we were the people that had to sort of make the money for the large corporate companies. So we just wanted to give a little back, and that's sort of where we are now with Driving Down.
Yeah, fantastic. And just to give the listeners a bit of context, I've been working with Joseph and Nick now probably for, I think, sort of nearly 6 months, haven't I? And I certainly, it's interesting actually how we came about being introduced, because we were actually introduced through one of my clients. We had a sort of co-client who sort of introduced us and sort of thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to have a chat. And I know that you've been doing a sterling service for them, so it takes a fair bit for me to bring another company on, sort of say, that I recommend their services. But I think the proof is always in the pudding. And like I say, we've been working together. Yeah, we've been working together for like 6 months, and I know that you've made some real impact with the savings for some of the clients that I work with already. So first of all, thank you for that, because I think it's a tricky business at the moment, and transport operations, it's busy. It's a big business, but margins are tight. It's not the easiest place to make a profit. There's lots of expenditure. There's lots of huge costs in the asset and running the vehicles. And the data I'm aware of around running HGVs, for example, is something like 30% of the operating expense of an HGV transport business. So we're talking a major margin of operators expenditure. So if you don't mind, guys, obviously from a conceptual point of view, we understand driving down it. The clue's in the title, right? So driving down the cost of buying fuel is essentially the presumption. First of all, could you explain in layman's terms for a listener how the fuel card market works, if that's okay? Should we just sort of explain that initially?
Yeah, of course. So fuel cards really in sort of Europe are used quite predominantly, and in most of Europe they're used on a pump-based price, whereas actually in the UK it's worked mainly on a weekly fixed price. So you get a price fixed for each week, and that's the price you pay for your fuel. Okay, but because that price changes weekly, it gives the opportunity for most fuel card providers or resellers to actually add additional margin into the price based on the fluctuations. So because of that, it actually means that the UK is actually the most profitable market in Europe when it comes to fuel cards. So what you end up getting is the top 3 providers or the top 4 providers in the UK are actually owned by corporate international businesses, because they found the opportunity in the UK market and realized that there's obviously revenue and growth and profits to be made from that. So how it would work in sort of, just to give you a simple terms, is for instance, if you were given a price for 1 week, let's say I gave you the price of £1 per litre. I wish, obviously everybody wishes right now that it was that cheap. But let's just try and keep it simple for me and my maths. So if I was to give you £1 a litre for your fuel, and I was to say that the market was going to rise by a penny, so the market is rising by a penny, what could potentially happen is that week, your price for the following week was actually £1.02. Okay, you don't notice necessarily that there's a big fluctuation in your price. You see, okay, it's gone up by 2p. That seems about where you probably expect it to be. However, you're actually paying a penny more than you should be versus what the market is. Okay. And that in the short term, in 1 week, for instance, might not necessarily seem like a lot. But if you then compare that to 52 weeks of the year, all of a sudden, you're actually paying 52 pence above where you should be. And if you then extrapolate that out for sort of customers that are using 1,000 litres, 10,000 litres, 100,000 litres, that additional cost can be the difference between potentially paying a salary, paying a van payment every month. And it's such a difficult industry to keep a track on, because the market data, which is based on Platts market, is the fuel market data. And because that data actually costs a significant amount, to be able to track it week on week to make sure that you're not overpaying actually then costs you even more. And obviously there's all different revenue factors that these providers then start initiating into your invoice and an account. Things like sort of insurance fees that aren't necessarily applicable, carbon fees that aren't necessarily giving the entire fee to any carbon offsetting scheme. There's all sorts of different types of variables that you end up paying these fuel card resellers that you shouldn't necessarily be paying them, and therefore you're overpaying. And that's where we come in, is to try and sort of shed a bit of light onto what is obviously quite a dark and unfortunately untransparent industry at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. I think I've learned loads out of that, actually. Really, really appreciate that. Joseph, have you got sort of anything to add to that Nick sort of explained around the fuel card market?
No, I think Nick's absolutely nailed it there, really. Just to give sort of everyone a bit of an overview.
Makes a change.
It does, yeah. It gives everyone a little bit of an overview as to what the market actually does. The other thing as well, what I always like to emphasise is, we speak to transport managers all the time. We speak to people running large fleets, and they're experts in their field, they're experts in their industry. So whether that's haulage, whether that's transport, or whether that's delivering agricultural feeds, whatever that might be, they know that like the back of their hands. And here at Driving Down, we like to think we're the experts when it comes to fuel cards, delivery of fuel, delivery of fuel, Adblue and everything like that. So what we always say is it's always good just to get a second opinion, have a little look through your invoices, make sure they are following the market, make sure it's as transparent as it can be, because ultimately there's no harm in looking. And we charge absolutely nothing to look through invoices. And for us, if someone's on a great price, we'll happily say you're on an absolutely brilliant price. And it is out there. It is great to see that some people are paying great prices. Unfortunately, probably 8 times out of 10, the prices what we are seeing are quite a little bit higher than where they should be.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting because my understanding of how our clients are buying fuel is that they will ring around the fuel card companies on a weekly basis to try and get the best, what they're being told is the best price. But there's this element of non-transparency around what the actual market's doing, because I think a lot of operators will think that the market's just going one way, right? And they're getting told that it's just going one way, which is up all the time. So so what I then understand is actually, if the market's fluctuating, there's going to be times when they're paying an inflated price, and actually they're being told that it's inflating, but actually the market's dropping, and therefore that's all margin that they're being charged. Is that, am I sort of making a correct assumption around that's how fuel cards operate?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, as you say, the fluctuations mean it's a lot easier for fuel card companies to apply their margin and sort of hide it amongst the fluctuations. The other thing that you sort of hit on the point there was, and you're absolutely right, is if they're comparing their prices against other fuel card providers, that's not to say that all the providers aren't necessarily holding a price in the profit. So, for instance, if, as we used the example before there, if the market's increased by a penny and everybody puts it up 2p, you're under the illusion that the market has increased by 2p because that's what all your providers have done. So you don't necessarily know that there's still a penny applied into your price. And this is where we come back to is there's the sort of two sides to the coin. One side of the coin is, yes, the savings to be made, and that's our main MO, is to try and obviously help the businesses save on their fuel. But I think also there's a time element here. Is every single week these companies are having to either ring round providers to negotiate the best price, or they're having to compare the prices, they're having to analyze their invoices to make sure that the prices are following through on the invoice, and to make sure they're not being overcharged with any surcharges. So there's a time element and a cost element, which is where we come in, which is to take that away from the businesses, take away some of the headaches, and to obviously then, in turn, help them identify those savings. And I mean, Joe sort of hit on it before as well, which is our business is to try and help businesses save money, and our charge is only based on their saving. So therefore, there's no interest for ourselves to bring anybody on board that is not going to save any money. So at the end of the day, if you're on a fantastic deal, at least give us the information and we can give you the peace of mind to say, hey, you're on a cracking deal, go nuts.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of what I understand your offer is. So if you Joseph, if you can just sort of explain that a bit more. So just explain how, because a lot of people will be listening going, driving down or a fuel card company, right? But in reality, I imagine the fuel card companies are really hating what you're doing, because it's sort of like it's putting the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit. So can you just sort of explain sort of how driving down works in comparison to now people have got a better understanding of the fuel card market? What is it that driving down does?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing what I always say is, firstly, we don't sell, we don't distribute, we don't manufacture fuel cards. We are the complete middle person between your current supplier and you. So we literally sit in the middle and we act like an external transport manager would, but we look over things like your fuel, your Adblue and everything like that. So in terms of what we do here, firstly, we'd look through your prices, we'd look through how much you're spending, we'd look through your suppliers, and then we'd compare that against our current suppliers, and what prices we're seeing from other businesses that are doing a similar amount of fuel to yourself. We like to think of it like people are buying together. If you're all coming together and getting it through the same supplier, let's hope we can all get it at the same rate. And if we can get it at a lower rate for 4, 5, 6 different companies that might be spending 10,000, 20,000, however much they might be spending on a weekly or monthly basis, if we can get one price across the board, which is going to save you all money, it's better than people being on completely different prices and having someone, like Nick said earlier on, handle it and sort of take care of it. As many people have 3, 4, 5 different suppliers at the moment, they could be ringing around, chasing up, trying to put through to their account manager. Sometimes, even for ourselves, that can take 20, 30 minutes before you actually speak to the right person about it. And if you've got 4 or 5 different suppliers, it's who's best to go to. Now, the beauty of driving down is because, at the moment we're currently managing circa 50 million litres. So with us having that sort of market and with us having that sort of much data, we can see exactly what the prices are going to get down to with each supplier. So sometimes we'll know, actually, this supplier is able to beat that company this week. So we sort of know who to ring around to, when to ring around, and the sort of best timing and the best sort of days to do it. I think I've covered everything there. Have you anything to add there?
Yeah. I think the only thing I will say is that at the end of the day, the pricing from the suppliers is their prerogative. Okay, so for instance, all we're trying to do is obviously help the customers and guide them into potentially getting a better deal and a better rate. So at the end of the day, we're not directing the providers on what price they should be giving the customers. We're helping the provider to maintain and ensure that customer stays with them. Because at the end of the day, we understand those customers sit with those providers, and we're trying to tell the provider, look, we've spoken to the customer, they're now aware they're potentially overpaying slightly. Would you like to have the opportunity to keep that customer and therefore reduce the price? Or alternatively, we can move them and direct them to another provider. Okay, the fuel card market in the UK is saturated with different providers, so there's opportunities all the time to move elsewhere. If you speak to somebody and mention the word fuel card, they'll use some expletive and say that they've been called about 15 times that week already. Okay, so there's opportunities for clients to move all the time. So we're only giving the current supplier the opportunity to keep that customer, and so that it doesn't leave them. And if they don't want to, reduce the price, if they don't want to pull it into line to where it should be, then that's absolutely fine. We'll just unfortunately have to move it somewhere else. But we want to give that provider the opportunity to keep that customer and to keep those litres in the business as well.
Yeah, fantastic. In my head, and I'm a bit simple when it comes to these things, but to help listeners sort of understand, I see it. You're almost like their insurance broker, but for fuel. So you're like a fuel broker almost, is how I see it. So you're the person on their behalf who's giving them the advice based on your expertise and your knowledge of the market, and an insurance broker will get a fee essentially from it. Generally, the difference, I suppose, is how the fee is earned, because you earn your fee from the savings that you make. So the incentives, it's like a win-win situation for an operator, because they win, you get paid out of the winnings that they make from the saving. But it's very similar. I see that relationship to like an insurance brokerage, where they go to an insurance broker who they trust, will go and find them the best fleet deal for their fleet and make sure that they're properly protected, and to make sure they're paying a fair price and that they've got the right coverage that they need. And you're doing the same thing from a fuel provider point of view, making sure that they're getting the right fuel at the right price to ensure that they're in line or aligned with the market and paying a fair price for the size of their fleet. Because I'm assuming, like with anything, the stronger the buying power, the better the price, right? Those operators who've got the stronger buying power with the bigger fleets are always going to generate potentially the strongest prices. Is that sort of how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've near enough nailed it really there. We are very sort of similar to the insurance game, very similar to the gas and power game as well. In terms of people going online to sort of get quotes, everything like that. The only sort of difference is on a weekly basis we do it, whereas your insurance game and your sort of gas and power game, that's done on an annual basis, and people usually stick with that for the sort of year, 2 years, however long they may sign up for. Whereas with ourselves, it's that continuous work that people are actually having to put in themselves within the business, or employing 2 or 3 people within the business to sort of manage that for them. Whereas it's just them straight sort of outsourcing it. Like you said there, within the insurance world, people will go to market, they'll find you a deal, and they might have a sort of percentage incorporated. Whereas for us, it's all about making sure you're saving. And if you're saving week in, week out, that's obviously where we make our money. And ultimately, with 52 opportunities throughout the year for these fuel card companies and other suppliers to make their sort of margins, you tend to find that it's quite easy to save money with fuel cards.
Fantastic. And I think like you say, because there's so many uninitiated operators out there who are paying their own people to go and ring and sort of get fobbed off, and to invest all that time and waste all that money in doing so, it's very easy for the fuel card companies to be able to fob them off, because they haven't got the market data, which is the transparency that we're talking about. Just for the benefit of the listeners, are you maybe able to share? I know you'll be won't be able to potentially share the companies and that kind of thing, but just to the best extent that you have, are you able to share maybe some of the savings that you've seen for some operators? I know certainly with some of my clients, it's been some significant savings that's really made an impact to their bottom line, because essentially that savings all margin as well. It's dropping straight to the bottom line. So are you able to just sort of share maybe, a size of fleet and maybe the sort of money you can typically save?
So you're the salesman, you go nuts on this one.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've had some great success, if I'm being honest. So one of my first larger clients that we sort of brought on board was a business not too far from ourselves, based in Sheffield. Now they run a fleet of around 70 vans. They do utilities, so they're up and down the country. They're currently installing charge points, different things like that, gas and electric. Now they have a supplier, and they've stayed with the same supplier, so they've not had to switch fuel cards, nothing like that. They've passed over the management of the account, and within the first 12 months, through not only fuel cards, but also through Adblue, and then just that direction of drivers to different sites, they managed to get a saving of over 62,000. Wow. Which made a big difference. I'm sure they had a great Christmas party out of it as well.
We never got an invite, did we?
I'm still waiting for that, but you never know.
That's £1,000 a vehicle, and that's on a van. That's a van, not even an HGV.
Absolutely, wow. And there was an awful lot of that, obviously, based over 52 weeks. There was some hefty reductions one week, there was some smaller reductions the next, but over the space of 52 weeks, it really adds up. We've got quite a nice large amount of customers that are based around not too far from yourself, really, Pete. So based around the sort of Doncaster area, we do an awful lot with a lot of like traffic management companies and different businesses like that. And we're sort of averaging at savings between 10 and 12%. Varying on business size and varying on the starting price, but we like to average between sort of 10 and 12%. So if you think your fuel bill, for argument's sake, is 25,000, per month, hopefully we can get your savings there of about 2,500. And it seems that that seems to be the sort of the rough savings what we're finding people so far, between sort of 10 and 12%, and upwards in a lot of cases.
Wow. And like you say, if you had, so just whilst you're on, Joseph, can you just explain, because one of the things I like about the service you're offering is I like to be able to recommend stuff that's like risk-free and hasn't got all the nasty sales strategies and tactics and that kind of thing. Now with your offering, it's quite it's like you say, it's essentially risk-free, isn't it? Can you just sort of explain the process? So if someone was to get in touch with you on LinkedIn, obviously said, I've heard you on the Fleet Geeks podcast, can I find out a bit more? What sort of savings would I look at? How does that process work?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no problem. So if someone listens to us on the Fleet Geeks podcast, get in touch, say where you've sort of come from, everything like that. How it works is we'll firstly just start by a brief conversation, really. How many vehicles are you running? What are you roughly spending a week or a month on your fuel? And what's your pricing? That's the main thing, is what sort of pricing you're currently receiving. From there, that's enough information for me to go ahead, do a few calculations and say, okay, actually, on your 6 vehicles, you're spending 18,000 a month. We reckon we'll be able to save you between 2,400 and 2,800. Now, that's before we even look at invoices. We can tell all that just based on the amount of vehicles people are using, the amount what they're spending, and obviously the pricing. Then when we start looking at the invoices, we start to notice actually there's potentially more savings. Like Nick addressed earlier on, there's hidden charges and there's little fees that get associated on there. So we'd start having a little look at that. And what we always say is, we'll have a look at the invoices, we'll have a conversation with you. If there's savings there, what we always do is, for argument's sake, if someone was to say, Joseph, we're in March now, we would say, actually, that's perfect. You can have the first 4 weeks. We won't take any payment until after 4 weeks. And you'll have 4 weeks to get those savings. Therefore, it's completely risk-free. So we can step in, we can start saving businesses money straight away. They can see the benefit of our services, because a lot of people are always skeptical. We've seen that through our time, and unfortunately, people have switched that many fuel card providers, A lot of people think we're actually the same. Now, we don't want people to switch fuel cards. We'd prefer you to stay exactly where you are. We know the hassle when it comes to switching 70 or 80 vehicles, or even 6 or 7 vehicles with new fuel cards. So, we'd prefer everyone to stay exactly where they are. So what we say is, give us a few weeks. Let's show you the exact savings, what you can get. And usually after 2 or 3 weeks, people sort of come back to us and they're quite sort of happy to recommend us in totally different places and everything like that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think, sorry, just to touch on that, I think Joe's absolutely right. I think the main sort of hurdle or objection we come up against is it sounds too good to be true. And that's such a strange objection handling to deal with, because it always, when we first started, it was like, well, how do we explain that to somebody, and how do we sort of like reinforce that we're not, trying to pull the wool over their eyes? And that's really why we sort of promoted the let's work on the account for 3 weeks, 4 weeks before any payment comes out. Because at the end of the day, if you're saving £2,000 a month, it's there in black and white, and you're getting charged, 25% of that or whatever it is, then all of a sudden you're in a position where you're thinking, well, I'm taking home profit at the end of the day. So it's a no-brainer. And that's how we sort of want to emphasize it, that at the end of the day, it's a no-brainer. And these customers, once they see that, and the results are delivered, and what we've potentially, honest, transparent selling to them, we delivered on, then all of a sudden you get this referral route that comes through, because you get everybody starts discussing it. Let's be honest, in the logistics or the fuel world or wherever, whatever industry you're in, you're going to have businesses that you talk to on a daily basis. And that over the last especially within the last 6 months, has been one of our sort of main channels for sales. It's just word of mouth. And as we said before, with fuel cards being such a sort of untrustworthy industry at the moment, that's great for us, because all of a sudden our reputation is what's preceding us, and people are seeing that we're delivering on what we hopefully commit to do. And that then builds up loyalty, and then that still builds up that channel, and it's just a bit of a growing avalanche.
Yeah, I absolutely. The values in our flagship business is loyalty, trust, and confidence, because it's about that loyalty. It's about building the trust and confidence in what you're doing and what you're offering. And I like that you give people that opportunity to sort of build the trust in you without having to pay first. And obviously, ultimately, they already know how much hard work it is to get a good price, or what they perceive to be a good price, because they're having to make the calls and get fobbed off and messed around. And you guys are sort of essentially you're burdening the risk by taking the effort out of it and
absolutely
putting the labour into making those calls. So
you're 100% right there. You're 100% right there, Pete. And I don't know if you can see behind there. I know it's probably quite small on the text, but just on the Driving Down logo there, it says at the bottom, honest support for hardworking businesses. And that's exactly what we're here to do. If someone can ring us and say, is this price competitive? Is it not? We can assist them. That's what we're here to do. So it just gives people that little peace of mind that actually they're getting looked after by, an extra person. It's like having, another account manager who's managing everything and overseeing everything, but who's giving you that honest advice rather than anything else. And a lot of the time, the other thing what we try to do, Pete, is we try to give warnings, really, which is one thing what most fuel card companies don't do. So if we know that the market, for argument's sake, is going up, so if the market's going up by 2-3 pence, however much that might be going up by, our clients and also people on LinkedIn and different sort of platforms like that will warn them that the price is going up. The reason for that is if you're putting in 10,000 litres a week and you can save yourself 2 or 3 pence by putting, a fair chunk, maybe 2,000 litres in before the close of the week, you're going to get a better price on that. So it means you're not getting stung as bad. And likewise, if we see the market's falling, which, everyone likes to see that, we'll also tell people, hold off, get by on the bare minimum, wait till next week, because your price is going to be 3 pence, 4 pence cheaper. And, that makes a massive difference when it comes to transport. It's the difference between some people making profit and some people not.
Yeah, fantastic. I think it's really sort of interesting how I never really realised how murky the fuel card world was, and I think it's interesting that you're sort of shining a light on that. Just are you able to share sort of what is that a bit of a challenge? What fuel how fuel cards are taking your service offering? Are they giving you a bit of a challenge at all?
I think at the end of the day, these the fuel card companies, I can understand there's a little bit of a grievance to it, because at the end of the day, you're taking profit from a business which nobody ever likes. But we're not here to sort of say to these businesses, oh, you should be you should be giving your fuel away for free. It should be, a pound a litre at the moment. We're not in that industry. What we're trying to do is just make sure that businesses are paying a fair and honest price for their fuel. We all know businesses need to make money. I mean, at the end of the day, that's how the lights keep, running, and that's how people get paid, and et cetera, et cetera. But there's a difference between having potentially a margin on a customer and then also taking advantage of that customer. And that's where things have got to, is fuel cards, when they originally started, was about giving support for businesses, giving them preferential commercial rate of pricing to try and reduce their overheads. And the focus and the onus was on helping them supporting the customer. Now that onus is on maximizing and building profits on the customer to potentially pay corporate-owned companies or to support large corporations in hitting their revenue targets. And the focus is less on the customer, if at all, and just more about how they can obviously find other opportunities from them. So what we're trying to do is trying to just act as that middleman, as either from a consultative point of view or from a broker point of view. But either way, just act as that middleman to try and get that customer the support and to get that customer the beneficial pricing to make sure that their fuel cards are being used the right way.
Yeah, fantastic.
I think as well, just sorry to add on to what Nick was saying there, the other thing for the customers and our clients is if the fuel card companies, do try to put up a barrier or anything like that, it speaks volumes to these clients because, they've had to switch fuel cards that many times. And if you're running vehicles and for argument's sake, we identify that there's a saving in there, whatever that saving might be, if the fuel card company says, actually, we're not willing to reduce on this, or, we're keeping it at those prices for X, Y, and Z, well, it does speak, volumes to all of our clients, because if they know that, for argument's sake, Tim down the road's getting it 4p cheaper than him with the same supplier, why should that be happening? So the fuel card suppliers, a lot of them now are sort of warming to us because it means that they're not losing clients, and that's the beauty of it. People are sticking with them, and it's going back to the old school, like what Nick was saying. When we first sort of started in fuel cards, which was what fuel cards were all about, it seems to be doing a bit of a full cycle now, we feel.
Yeah, fantastic. I do have a bit of a question for you. So, at what size would a fleet start to see the benefits from your services? So, what's your, what sort of size is your target market? Have you got a specific type of customer? What sort of vehicles are they running? That kind of thing. Who are you looking to help?
Yeah, I think when we first started, obviously there's a lot of lessons to be learned from start to where we are now. I think when we first started, we identified it to be sort of anywhere between 5 to 20 vehicles. But actually over time, what we've come to realise is that at any fleet size at all, from 1 to 1,000, could do with our support and help. Because I think to begin with, we thought, right, okay, if any business is over a certain size, they might not necessarily need us. They might have somebody in-house that can do the work for them. But at the end of the day, the person that usually has to deal with that or has the fuel cards as their sort of one of the lists on their to-do list, or sorry, one of their items on their to-do list, they're not necessarily an expert in the field. So what can sometimes get confusing is people might say to us, why would we have you when we've already got such and such a person in this position that's doing it for us? And we're not saying, well, let's replace that person. What we're saying is let's support and help that person to run alongside and with them to try and obviously work on the fuel cards, because they're not an expert in that field. They may be an expert in other areas. We're the experts in that field. So let us help and support them to make the better decisions. So I honestly think nowadays it's open to any fleet, any size. It doesn't really matter to us, any industry. It's at the end of the day, it's all about, if we can identify you savings with your provider, then we'll go out and get them for you. And if it means if we can't identify you savings, it's not worthwhile us doing the work, so we won't do it. So what would be the point?
Fantastic. I think and that's, if people are listening, whether it's cars, vans, trucks, buses, whatever it may be, if they're buying fuel, if they're buying Adblue, essentially you're able to help save them money. Obviously, potentially, unless they're getting a great deal, in which case you'll just be transparent with them and tell them that you're getting a great deal.
Yeah, horse and cart. We've got a great deal on carrots at the moment as well. So yeah, go nuts.
Yeah, the only thing we can't supply at the moment is lettuce and tomatoes. So if anyone's looking for them, go elsewhere for them, because we can't help with that at all.
Amazing. So you get cheap fuel and dad jokes too. So that's great.
Even the dad bod to go with it.
And the dad bod to go with it. Love it. Fantastic. Is there anything I've missed, guys? Is there anything I've not asked that's maybe relevant, or do you feel like we've sort of gone through the offer and sort of what you're doing?
I think one of the main things. Sorry, Joe. I'll just kind of go for it. I think one of the main things we get from customers is it sounds like a lengthy process, or potentially it sounds like a complicated process, or what's going to change. Am I going to suddenly get different invoices, and it really is, and it's going to sound ridiculous, but it's a really simple sign-up process. Once the analysis is done and once we can identify what we can do for you, it's a 5-minute sign-up process. Nothing changes from your side, no changes to the business. It's simply just, we're going to save you money on your current fuel card setup. So, the proof's in the pudding, and we'll deliver on that for you. But there's no changes. There's no change to the cards. Nothing impacts the drivers. There's no change to your invoices. And I think that's the main thing that comes up is, it sounds great, but we don't want there to be any impact on us. And I think it's just re-emphasizing that point, that it doesn't impact you. It's purely about getting you savings on what you currently have set up within the company.
Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly what Nick was saying there. And the other thing as well, what we always do emphasise on is we're not a contracted service. And that's the beauty of ourselves is, if you come on board and, for argument's sake, after 6 weeks, you say, this isn't for me, we totally get that. The good thing, touch wood, is, we don't lose customers for that reason or anything like that. Customers, once they come on, they see the benefit in us, what we're doing sort of week in, week out. They see the savings, and over that longevity of time, if people can think, actually, it's getting handled, it's getting looked after, and it's one thing that I do not have to look at. A lot of people and a lot of businesses will take sort of great pleasure in that.
Fantastic. I think my bit to add is that I know that when I've spoken to some of my clients, there's an element of pride there around, well, I'm a really good negotiator. I've got a really good price, and I've got a great price on my fuel. I said, well, I know you might feel proud of the job you do, but it's good to just sanity check it, because any savings are margin, and they are margin, and it's a really tight game at the minute, and a really tight game.
It is, and Pete, you've really just hit the sort of the nail on the head there. We've got an awful lot of people that do say the exact same. That say, we speak to our account manager every week. We know we're on a great price. We know, unfortunately, you'll never be able to get close to the pricing. And then sometimes you look at the pricing and say, you might speak to your account manager every week, but your price might still be out by 4 or 5 pence. And it's one of those that it is like you say, people do like to think that, they're having that conversation, they're negotiating on the pricing. But, myself and Nick both know from working in the fuel card game, if we knew that we had a customer I'm talking 5 years ago, but if we knew we had a customer that might be ringing up every week to get their pricing knocked down, you'd put that pricing up because you knew they'd be ringing every week. So for argument's sake, if you knew that customer rang up and wanted a penny off every week, you'd put your price up by 2p, because then you could bank a penny. So you knew that customer would ring up, the price would go up by 2 pence, you'd drop it down by a penny. The customer thought he was having a great deal from you, but unfortunately you'd built a penny in. And from working in the fuel card game for a longevity of time, that was a common practice, very, very common practice. Yeah. So it's something that's out there, and people sort of expect these calls. The account managers expect to call every single week, and the account managers will have great conversations with the transport managers or whoever might be dealing with it, just to put them at ease. And that's what they're trained to do. That's why these account managers are there. Make sure that whether they talk about football or whether they talk about gardening, if it puts that transport manager or that person who's buying at ease, they know that they've won them over for that next week. So that's a big thing, and I think you're right there with touching on that there, Pete.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I think it's that pride thing in that, there's a lot of pride in running a good business and being able to negotiate and those kinds of things. So it can be tricky to admit that you need a bit of help, or to sort of allow someone else to sort of take that over for you. But I think what I would say is, if people are listening, just give it a try, and get in touch. So chaps, I think, unless there's anything else, I think we've sort of covered sort of anything there. How to just sort of finalise, like, any other business that you'd like to sort of let people know about, and how do people reach out and get in touch? Is LinkedIn the best way? Do you want them to drop an email? let me know. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, so as I say, like, feel free to get in touch with either of us on LinkedIn. Obviously, let us know where you come from the Fleet Geeks podcast, so we know, and then start a conversation. At the end of the day, you may as well have the peace of mind that you're on a great deal if you think you already are, or if you think you may be too small. Just get in touch. We're here for support for every business. You don't necessarily need to be a client for us to give you some free advice within the market, and we've got deals and sort of rates as well for all different fleet services and products. We've got fantastic Adblue rates. We've got industry knowledge about telematics. We've got industry knowledge about any vehicle insurance and stuff like that. We've got contacts within those industries. So anything that's related to fleet, our end goal is to become a one-stop shop for all your fleet services. So if it's a case if you just need some advice, get in touch. If it's a case you just want to, you want to tell us, haha, I told you so, I was on a great rate, then feel free to. We're quite happy to deal with that as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Exactly like Nick was saying there, feel free, just get in touch via LinkedIn, obviously, say that you've heard us on the podcast, everything like that. And like Nick said there, the other thing where a lot of businesses seem to be overpaying at the moment is the Adblue. So, you might be getting an absolutely cracking rate on fuel cards, but, Adblue is where a lot of businesses make their money, and that can be anything from 10% up to 100% on people's actual prices on the Adblue. So, it's one of those that, always just check. There's no harm in checking, is there? And give a phone call, speak to myself, speak to Nick, and we'll be more than happy to have a little look over things. No
worries. Right. Appreciate it, Joseph. Nick, thank you very much for joining me. Listeners, what I'd task you with is drop Joseph, connect on LinkedIn with the chaps, connect with Joseph Simpson on LinkedIn, follow the Driving Down LinkedIn page. I always enjoy seeing the weekly video that comes out on a Thursday. That's the market forecast. It's good to know what's happening in the market and connect with them. And like I say, obviously, I always say subscribe and like our podcast and our YouTube channel and subscribe to the podcast as well. But just what I'd ask this time, drop a comment below, drop a comment in the YouTube, drop a comment on the podcast, and let us know you've been in touch with Joseph, and let's see how much savings you've made, because that'll be really interesting for people sort of as they come and listen to the podcast and they come and listen and learn. Let them know what the savings have been. If you've had a fantastic experience, then make sure you drop us a note and let us know, and let people know in the comments. So thank you very much, gents, for joining me. It's been fantastic chatting to you, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon and let us know how the markets are in the future. So hope you enjoyed listening, and speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.